Alright, let's dive into one of the most elusive and controversial mysteries hidden within the Warhammer 40k universe, the possibility of secret cults that record the true history of the Emperor. It's a tantalizing idea, one that feels almost too heretical to even consider in the grim darkness of the far future, where loyalty is demanded and doubt is punished without mercy. But what if, somewhere in the vast, shadowed corners of the galaxy, there are those who dare to collect the fragments of a forgotten truth, a truth that the Imperium itself might prefer to keep buried beneath layers of propaganda, blood, and fire. These secretive, perhaps even heretical groups might see themselves as the last true historians of humanity, risking everything to preserve the untarnished memory of their godlike ruler. Such an idea challenges the very foundation of the Imperium's power, for to question the Emperor's divine perfection is to invite destruction. Yet, history teaches us that the more tightly one tries to control the narrative, the more likely it is that whispers of dissent will find their way into the cracks of that carefully constructed facade. And in a galaxy as vast and ancient as this, where entire star systems can vanish into darkness for millennia, it's not impossible to imagine that some fragments of the Emperor's true story have managed to survive, clutched tightly by those who refuse to let the past be rewritten. Alright, if you dig deep enough into the vast archives of the Imperium, you'll inevitably come across whispered fragments of myths and half-forgotten legends that hint at the existence of secretive groups, those who dare to preserve the true, unfiltered history of the Emperor. It's a concept that cuts against the very grain of Imperial doctrine, where the past is meticulously shaped to fit the narrative of divine destiny and unbroken glory. Yet, in a galaxy filled with so many shadows and echoes, it's hard to believe that every inconvenient truth has been fully erased. Some stories speak of ancient scribes and record keepers who hid their knowledge away during the dark days of Old Night, long before the Emperor's grand vision took shape. These proto-historians, perhaps members of forgotten orders or hidden sects, might have glimpsed the Emperor as he truly was, a figure far more complex, flawed, and enigmatic than the shining god his modern worshippers revere. They could have passed down their accounts through generations, each record a fragile flame kept alive through centuries of repression and fear. Other tales drift in from the farthest reaches of the galaxy, from rogue traders and voidfarers who claim to have seen fragments of forbidden texts or ancient murals hidden in forgotten catacombs. These whispers suggest that entire worlds might still hold remnants of an unfiltered past, abandoned colonies and lost vaults where the truth has been preserved in stone and code. Perhaps these places are guarded by the descendants of those who once swore to keep the Emperor's secrets, their faith twisted into something darker and more desperate over the millennia. Then there are the murmurings of rogue psychers and renegade scholars who claim to have seen the past through visions, moments where the shroud of history briefly parts, revealing a man rather than a god. Some say the Emperor walked among men not as an omnipotent deity, but as a leader of flesh and blood, his motivations as tangled and human as any other. If even a fraction of these visions hold a kernel of truth, then perhaps these secretive keepers of memory are not just protectors of forgotten lore, but defenders of a much more dangerous idea, that the Emperor's humanity, his flaws and failures, might still matter in a galaxy that demands absolute faith. Of course, most of these stories are dismissed by the official scribes of the Adeptus Administratum as nothing more than heresy and superstition, the fever dreams of madmen or the lies of traitors. But isn't that always the way of things? The victors write the history, and the dissenters are silenced, their words erased, their bones ground into the dust of forgotten wars. Yet, the fact that these legends persist, that they continue to surface in the quiet corners of the galaxy, suggests that perhaps the truth has a way of clinging to the fabric of time, refusing to be completely erased. And if these myths are more than just the echoes of fractured minds, if they truly hold fragments of the Emperor's unvarnished past, then the implications for the Imperium are profound. After all, How can you truly control a galaxy if the foundation of your power is built on a lie? Finding concrete evidence of these secret memory keepers is, unsurprisingly, a nearly impossible task. The Imperium has spent millennia erasing, rewriting, and controlling every scrap of history to ensure that only the most favorable narrative remains. Yet, as with all things shrouded in shadow, a few fragments still manage to slip through the cracks, tantalizing hints that, when pieced together, begin to form a faint outline of a hidden truth. Some of the earliest whispers about these cults come not from open declarations or dramatic revelations, but from the margins of forgotten texts, the obscure footnotes of forgotten scholars, and the coded ramblings of those who once stood too close to the Emperor's true nature. One such fragment, often discussed among the more conspiratorial corners of the Adeptus Administratum, is the so-called Chronicle of the Lost Light. This ancient manuscript, said to have been penned during the final days of Old Earth's techno-barbarian chaos, supposedly contains a first-hand account of the Emperor's early rise, a version of history that casts him not as a divine being, but as a deeply strategic, fiercely ambitious warlord who bent entire nations to his will through sheer force of intellect and willpower. Of course, most scholars dismiss it as apocryphal, nothing more than the fevered scribblings of a madman trying to make sense of a world on the brink of rebirth. But if even a fraction of its claims are true, it would challenge the very foundation of the Imperial Creed. Then there are the scattered whispers of the Hexagrammaton Scrolls, a collection of cryptic, almost poetic verses that supposedly date back to the early days of the Great Crusade. These texts are said to contain veiled references to figures known only as the Memory Keepers, shadowy individuals who watched from the fringes of the Emperor's early conquests, recording every betrayal, every hidden deal, every grim sacrifice that paved the way for his rise to power. Some claim that these scrolls were written by rogue remembrancers, or perhaps even by the Emperor's own hand, carefully preserved in the forgotten vaults of Terran catacombs. Even more compelling are the rumors surrounding the reliquaries of the Forgotten Dawn, a series of ancient, dust-choked data stacks discovered deep within the Mechanicum's forbidden vaults on Mars. These relics, said to be among the earliest forms of digital record-keeping, supposedly contain fragments of unedited histories, accounts that predate the Imperium's birth and speak of an emperor who walked among his followers as a mortal man, not a living god. The few fragments that have leaked from these vaults are enough to make even the most jaded cogitator priest pause in awe, for they hint at a time when the Emperor made deals not only with the warriors of Terra, but with forces far darker and more dangerous. Of course, none of this constitutes definitive proof. The Mechanicum denies the very existence of such records, and the few fragments that do surface are quickly denounced as heretical forgeries. But those who have dedicated their lives to piecing together the Emperor's true history, the fringe historians, the rogue data scribes, the whispered keepers of memory, insist that these scattered fragments are part of a larger, hidden tapestry, a secret history woven into the very fabric of the Imperium itself. And perhaps that's the true genius of these secret cults, if they exist at all. By scattering their truths across 1,000 worlds and hiding them within the cracks of Imperial history, they have managed to evade the watchful eyes of the Inquisition, the Black Ships, and even the Emperor's own psychic gaze. They are the shadows in the corner of every archive, the whispers in the dark, the secrets that refuse to die, no matter how many times the Imperium tries to bury them. If you think about it, the very idea of preserving the Emperor's true history is inherently dangerous, not just to those who dare to do it, but to the entire structure of the Imperium itself. The Emperor is not just a man in the eyes of the Imperium, but the literal cornerstone of its faith, the living God whose will guides humanity through the dark tides of the galaxy. To challenge that image, even slightly, is to risk the unraveling of a myth so deeply embedded in human culture that it has become the very lifeblood of a million worlds. Consider for a moment the sheer scale of the lie. The Emperor is presented as a divine, perfect being, a flawless warrior, a peerless strategist, a god among men whose every word is a commandment. To most citizens of the Imperium, Questioning that narrative is unthinkable, almost blasphemous. But what if the truth is far more complicated? What if the Emperor was, in reality, a figure of contradictions? A visionary who dreamed of a united humanity, but was also willing to make unimaginable sacrifices to achieve that dream. A ruler whose ambitions were as ruthless as they were grand, who manipulated entire star systems with a cold, calculating precision that would make even the most hardened inquisitors pause. If even a fraction of this hidden history were to surface, it could shatter the fragile unity of the Imperium. After all, how can you demand absolute loyalty and blind faith when the very foundation of your power is built on a carefully constructed myth? How do you maintain control over a galaxy-spanning empire if the billions upon billions of soldiers, laborers, and serfs who serve you suddenly start to question the divine right of their overlord? It's a terrifying thought, one that even the most radical of the Adeptus Mechanicus priests or the most battle-hardened chapter masters would find hard to stomach. And yet, despite the obvious risks, the allure of the truth remains. There is something deeply human about the desire to understand where we come from, to seek out the untarnished past and confront the uncomfortable realities it reveals. It's the same drive that leads explorers to the edges of known space, that pushes scientists to unlock the secrets of the universe, and that compels scholars to dig through the ashes of forgotten wars for a glimpse of the real story behind the propaganda. For those who see the Emperor as more than just a symbol, as a being of flesh and blood whose decisions shape the fate of entire galaxies, the search for truth becomes an obsession, a dangerous, all-consuming quest that risks both body and soul. But perhaps the greatest threat of all is not simply that the truth might be uncovered, but that it might prove impossible to control. In a galaxy as vast and chaotic as this one, even the smallest spark of dissent can ignite a wildfire. The Emperor's own sons turned against him after all, and if the Primarchs, his most trusted, genetically engineered warriors, could find cause to rebel, what chance does a mere mortal empire have against the corrosive power of doubt? Maybe that's why the Inquisition is so relentless in its pursuit of heresy, why the Black Ships never cease their endless harvest of Psychers, and why the High Lords of Terra rule with an iron fist. They understand, perhaps better than anyone, that the Emperor's legacy is a double-edged sword, a symbol of unbreakable unity, but also a potential source of catastrophic upheaval if its true nature is ever revealed. And so the fragile truth remains hidden, wrapped in layers of myth, and guarded by the shadows of 1,000 secret orders. But for how long? How long before the cracks in that carefully constructed facade become too deep to ignore? In a galaxy where every breath is monitored, every whisper recorded, and every flicker of dissent ruthlessly crushed, it seems almost impossible to imagine that secret organizations dedicated to preserving the Emperor's true history could exist. The Imperium's grip is ironclad, its agents relentless in their pursuit of heresy and corruption. The Inquisition alone is a force so terrifyingly thorough that entire planets have been reduced to ash on the mere suspicion of treachery. And yet, if we believe the whispers, these cults have not only survived, but thrived, passing down forbidden knowledge from one generation to the next, right under the noses of their would-be executioners. But perhaps this isn't as impossible as it first appears. After all, the very scale of the Imperium is its greatest weakness. It is a monolithic, lumbering beast, vast beyond comprehension, with a bureaucracy so tangled and bloated that even the High Lords of Terra struggle to control its countless tendrils. It's a system built on fear, loyalty, and the iron law of control, but it's also one filled with blind spots, forgotten star systems, derelict void stations, and the dark underbelly of hive cities where the light of the Emperor rarely shines. In these places where the faceless masses toil and die in the shadows, secrets have a way of festering like old wounds, hidden from the harsh glare of imperial truth. It's also worth considering the nature of the Inquisition itself. For all its fearsome power, it is far from a unified force. It is a fractured, often paranoid institution, torn by internal rivalries and philosophical conflicts. Some Inquisitors believe in absolute purity, burning entire worlds at the first sign of heresy, while others favor subtlety, manipulation, and long-term control. This internal chaos can work to the advantage of those who wish to hide, as the Inquisition's agents are just as likely to turn on each other as they are to find a hidden cult. And then there are the rogue Inquisitors, those who have themselves gone too far, crossing the line from hunter to hunted, becoming outcasts with their own secrets to guard. The Adeptus Mechanicus, too, with all its technological might and ancient knowledge, is far from infallible. For every forge world that bristles with surveillance and data-scraping servitors, there are forgotten manufactorums, crumbling data vaults, and ancient machinery that no one truly understands. Even the Martian priesthood, so obsessed with the purity of data and the sanctity of the Omnissiah, struggles to control the chaotic tide of information that flows through its countless systems. And as many a tech priest has discovered to their horror, sometimes the machines themselves keep secrets, corrupted data cores, rogue algorithms, and whispering machine spirits that guard their own mysteries. But perhaps the most compelling reason why these cults might survive is the sheer unending chaos of the galaxy itself. In a universe where warp storms can cut off entire sectors for centuries, where Xeno's horrors strike without warning, and where entire planets vanish without a trace, the sheer unpredictability of existence provides a kind of dark sanctuary. It's a grim, desperate kind of freedom, but it's freedom nonetheless. A chance to slip through the cracks, to hide in the blind spots of a machine that was never designed to be perfect. And maybe, just maybe, that's why the Memory Keepers have endured. Because for all the Imperium's power, for all its ships, armies, and psychic might, it is still only human. It can burn worlds, silence dissent, and crush rebellion, but it cannot kill an idea. Not completely. Not forever. And in those forgotten places, in the shadows of history and the whispers of the forgotten, the truth still lives, hidden, but not yet lost. If there's one thing that fuels the fires of conspiracy and whispered legend more than anything else, it's the idea that someone, somewhere, might still be alive who remembers the Emperor not as a god, but as a man. It's a tantalizing thought that there are beings out there who walked the blood-soaked battlefields of old Earth, who saw the rise of the Emperor firsthand, and who might still carry the memories of his true nature. After all, the Great Crusade wasn't that long ago in the grand scheme of things, just a few millennia, a mere heartbeat in the lifespan of certain beings. Of course, the first names that come to mind are the Primarchs themselves. These towering demigods, the Emperor's own sons, were by his side from the very beginning, shaping the destiny of the galaxy with every battle, every conquest. But the truth is, the Primarchs are hardly reliable witnesses. Most of them turn traitor, descending into madness, corruption, or outright heresy, and those who remain loyal are as much products of Imperial propaganda as the myths they helped create. If they remember the Emperor's true nature, they have done an excellent job of hiding it, either out of loyalty, fear, or simple pragmatism. After all, to admit that their father was anything less than divine would be to invite chaos into their already fragile domains. But what about the lesser-known figures of the Great Crusade? The nameless soldiers, the mortal generals, the unaugmented warriors who marched alongside the Emperor before the legions rose to prominence. It's not impossible to imagine that some of them might have survived, either through arcane technology, forbidden rituals, or sheer stubborn luck. The galaxy is vast, and the warp is a strange, unpredictable thing. Who's to say that some ancient Terran warlord, long thought dead, hasn't found a way to outlive his own legend, watching from the shadows as the Imperium he helped build crumbles around him? Then there are the Psychers, those whose minds burn so brightly that time itself seems to bend around them. It's said that some of the earliest human Psychers, those who first learned to harness the raw, untamed power of the warp, were given a place of honor at the Emperor's side during his earliest campaigns. These individuals would have witnessed the birth of the Imperium, the forging of the Primarchs, and the first brutal steps of the Great Crusade. If any of them still live, their minds would be treasure troves of forgotten knowledge, assuming, of course, that the long centuries of exposure to the warp haven't driven them completely mad. And let's not forget the navigators, those strange, mutated, third-eyed pilots who guide humanity's starships through the immaterial hellscape of the warp. Their families have served the Emperor since the earliest days of his rule, their lineages stretching back to the dawn of space travel itself. It's not beyond reason to think that somewhere within the twisted labyrinthine halls of their ancient palaces, there might be those who still remember the Emperor as he truly was, not a god, but a conqueror, a warlord, and perhaps even a flawed, fallible man. Of course, this is all just speculation, the kind of wild, whispered theory that gets you executed for heresy if you speak it too loudly. But isn't that what makes it so compelling? The idea that somewhere, hidden in the shadows of this vast, uncaring galaxy, there are still those who carry the unvarnished truth, who remember the Emperor as he truly was, and who might one day share their memories with a world that has forgotten its past. Because in the end, memory is a powerful thing, a weapon as sharp as any blade, as dangerous as any plasma gun. And as long as there are those who remember, the past can never truly die. If there's one thing the galaxy has in abundance, it's secret societies, shadowy orders, and hidden cults. In a universe where the line between science and mysticism is blurred beyond recognition, where ancient rituals are as much a part of warfare as bolter rounds and chainswords, it's not hard to imagine that some of these groups might have their own reasons for seeking out the truth about the Emperor. After all, for those who dwell in the shadows, knowledge is power. And what greater knowledge could there be than the true nature of the being upon whose will the entire Imperium rests? Take, for instance, the mysterious and often mistrusted navigator houses. These ancient bloodlines, mutated and twisted by millennia of exposure to the warp, are as close to royalty as any human can be without divine sanction. Their very existence is a paradox, both essential to the survival of the Imperium and fundamentally alien to the ideals of purity and human supremacy that the ecclesiarchy preaches. It's not hard to imagine that some among them, driven by pride or sheer curiosity, might have sought to uncover the true origins of their benefactor. After all, the Emperor himself once walked among them, guiding their ancestors through the first dangerous steps into the depths of the warp. Perhaps they still carry fragments of that early knowledge, hidden away in the vaults of their labyrinthine palaces, guarded by generations of twisted, third-eyed scions who remember far more than they let on. And then there are the Psyker Covens, those shadowy circles of witchkin and warp-touched outcasts who have spent centuries exploring the darker corners of human potential. The black ships may carry away the weak and the damned, but not every Psyker is a broken, shivering wretch. Some are powerful enough to bend reality itself to their will, to peer into the minds of gods and see through the veil of time and space. It's not beyond belief that some of these individuals might have glimpsed the Emperor's true nature in their visions, not as a distant, perfect god, but as a being of flesh and blood, capable of both greatness and terrible mistakes. Of course, no discussion of secretive orders would be complete without mentioning the various offshoots of the Astartes, those isolated chapters and renegade warbands who have long since severed their ties with the wider Imperium. These warriors, bred for war and steeped in the blood of 1,000 battles, might seem like unlikely candidates for philosophical reflection, but many of them still carry the memories of their Legion days, those long, brutal centuries when they fought side by side with the Emperor himself, when his voice still echoed in their minds and his dreams guided their blades. Some of these chapters, now isolated and bitter, might still cling to the fragments of those early days, guarding their secrets like sacred relics, passing down tales of a man who was once their father, their brother, and their lord. Even within the ranks of the Inquisition itself, there are those who might be tempted by the allure of forbidden knowledge. Radical inquisitors, those who walk the thin line between duty and heresy, often find themselves drawn to the darkest corners of the galaxy in their pursuit of truth. To them, the Emperor's divinity is a question, not a certainty, a mystery to be unraveled, not a doctrine to be blindly accepted. For these brave, or perhaps foolish souls, the quest for the Emperor's true nature is a matter of personal honor, a challenge to their faith, and a test of their own strength. And then, of course, there are the whispers of stranger things, of ancient Xenos cults that might have known the Emperor in his earliest days, of dark mechanicum enclaves that still cling to the forbidden technologies of the dark age of technology, and of half-mad rogue traders who claim to have found relics of old Earth in the depths of forgotten star systems. In a galaxy as old and twisted as this one, the past is never truly dead, and the truth, no matter how deeply buried, has a way of coming to light. Because, in the end, the Emperor's legacy is not just a story of conquest and domination, but a tapestry of hidden truths and forgotten whispers, a legend woven from the blood and dreams of countless generations. And for those willing to look beyond the surface, for those brave enough to dig into the shadows of history, the truth is always there, waiting to be found. If you're trying to keep a secret for thousands of years, you need more than just silence and shadows. You need symbols, rituals, and technology, the kind of things that can survive long after flesh has turned to dust and memories have faded into myth. In a galaxy as brutal and unforgiving as this one, where even the strongest fortresses crumble and the mightiest armies turn to ash, the only truly enduring things are ideas and the methods used to preserve them. One of the most intriguing theories about how these secretive cults might pass down their knowledge is through the use of carefully encoded symbols and sigils, a kind of language that bypasses the limits of spoken words and written texts. After all, words can be misinterpreted, corrupted, or erased, but a symbol, once understood, can carry meaning across millennia. It's said that some of the earliest human civilizations, long before the rise of the Emperor, used similar techniques to encode their sacred lore, twisting spirals, interlocking circles, and geometric patterns that spoke to the soul as much as the mind. Perhaps these ancient methods were rediscovered during the early days of the Imperium, woven into the secret rites of those who sought to preserve the Emperor's true story. Then there are the rituals, those strange, half-remembered ceremonies that echo through the hidden corners of the galaxy, performed by hooded figures in forgotten vaults and shadowed catacombs. It's a common enough theme in human history, the idea that certain acts, performed in just the right way, at just the right time, can capture a moment in time, sealing a fragment of the past within the ritual itself. Some believe that these ceremonies are more than mere superstition, that they are a kind of living code, a means of passing down hidden knowledge without ever committing it to paper or data slate. The exact nature of these rites, of course, is a closely guarded secret, but whispers persist of blood sacrifices, fire-drawn symbols, and whispered chants that echo through the warp itself. And what about the technology? It's easy to forget, in an Imperium that views the machine spirit as something almost divine, that not all technology is purely mechanical. There are those who speculate that the ancient Mechanicum, in its endless quest to recover the lost wonders of the dark age of technology, stumbled upon devices capable of storing more than just raw data machines that can capture thoughts, memories, and even entire lifetimes, preserving them in ways that defy the ravages of time. Perhaps some of these devices have fallen into the hands of those who seek to preserve the Emperor's true history, their circuits humming with secrets too dangerous to be spoken aloud. And then, of course, there's the possibility of genetic memory, the idea that knowledge can be passed down through bloodlines, encoded in the very DNA of those who carry the Emperor's legacy. It's a controversial theory, to say the least, but in a galaxy where entire worlds have been shaped by the genetic whims of long-dead scientists, it's not entirely out of the question. After all, the Emperor himself was a master of genetic engineering, a being who created the Primarchs as living weapons, each one a reflection of his own fragmented soul. Who's to say that he didn't embed some fragment of his true self in the blood of his followers, creating a living archive of his own memories, hidden within the very bodies of those who still serve his will? Of course, all of this is pure speculation, the kind of thing that gets you burned as a heretic if you speak it too loudly in the wrong company. But for those who dwell in the shadows, for those who seek the hidden truths of the past, these whispers of forgotten rites and forbidden technologies are more than just idle dreams. They are a lifeline, a thread of continuity stretching back through the long, dark centuries to the very dawn of human history, a way of keeping the past alive, even in the face of the Imperium's relentless march towards oblivion. Because in the end, a memory is only as strong as the methods used to preserve it. And for those who dare to challenge the official history, who seek to uncover the Emperor's true legacy, the battle for the past is one that never truly ends. If you start digging into the myths and legends of ancient humanity, you quickly realize that the idea of secret keepers, guardians of forbidden knowledge, and hidden truths is as old as civilization itself. It's almost as if the human mind has always been haunted by the notion that somewhere behind the curtain of accepted history, there are those who know the real story. Those who keep the flames of forgotten truth alive even as the world around them descends into chaos and ignorance. Take, for example, the ancient Greek concept of the mysteries, secretive religious rites held in places like Eleusis and Samothrace. These ceremonies, shrouded in shadow and whispered through generations, promised their initiates a glimpse of hidden wisdom, a chance to peer beyond the veil and grasp the deeper truths of existence. Participants were sworn to secrecy, their oaths as binding as the iron chains of an imperial penitentiary, and to this day, the exact nature of those rites remains a mystery. Some have speculated that these ancient cults, with their rituals of death and rebirth, were early attempts to encode and preserve human knowledge in a time when written texts were rare and easily lost. It's not hard to imagine that similar practices might have survived into the far future, hidden away in the forgotten corners of the galaxy, their secrets passed down from one generation to the next in whispered rites and shadowed rituals. Or consider the legend of the Keepers of the Black Library, that ancient mythical repository of forbidden knowledge said to lie hidden within the depths of the webway. If even a fraction of the stories are true, then this place holds the collected wisdom of an entire race, a library of dark truths and dangerous knowledge that the Aldari have guarded for millennia. In some ways, the concept of the Black Library echoes the old human myths of secret temples and hidden archives, places where forbidden lore is locked away to protect the unworthy from its power. It's a potent symbol, the idea that knowledge itself can be dangerous, that some truths are too powerful to be freely shared, and that those who seek them out risk their very souls in the process. Then there are the tales of the Hermetic Orders, those secretive brotherhoods of scholars and mystics who sought to unlock the mysteries of the universe through a blend of science, magic, and divine revelation. The most famous of these, the Order of the Golden Dawn, is said to have dabbled in all manner of strange rites, from alchemy to astral projection, their members driven by an insatiable hunger for knowledge. It's not hard to see the echoes of this in the shadowy cults that some believe still linger in the dark corners of the Imperium. Groups of outcast scholars, rogue psychers, and renegade tech priests who cling to forbidden truths in defiance of the Imperial Creed. Even the old myths of secret societies, from the Freemasons to the Rosicrucians, carry hints of this same obsession with hidden knowledge and sacred rites. These groups, often painted as sinister conspiracies by their enemies, have long been accused of guarding ancient wisdom and manipulating the course of history from the shadows. It's a theme that crops up again and again in human storytelling, the idea that somewhere, in the darkness behind the thrones of power, there are those who pull the strings, their motives as hidden and unknowable as the stars themselves. Of course, it's easy to dismiss all of this as mere superstition, the idle fantasies of a species obsessed with secrets and shadows. But isn't that what makes these stories so compelling? The idea that somewhere, beyond the reach of the Inquisition's burning gaze, there are those who still remember the truth, those who refuse to let the past be erased, who cling to their forbidden knowledge like a drowning man clings to a splinter of wood. And in the end, perhaps that's what the Memory Keepers truly are. Not just guardians of lost histories, but echoes of a far older human impulse, a desire to understand the world in all its terrible complexity, to grasp the hidden threads of fate and pull them into the light. Because as long as there are those who remember, as long as even a single soul clings to the forgotten truths of the past, the flame of memory can never truly be extinguished. The idea of completely eradicating these secret cults, of wiping out every last whisper, every hidden archive, every shadowed order, is a comforting fantasy for the Lords of Terra. After all, the Inquisition has made a career out of purging heresy, hunting down rogue psychers, and burning entire worlds to ash in the name of purity. If any force in the galaxy could crush a hidden society into dust, it would be the fanatical, unrelenting agents of the Inquisition. But even their might has its limits, and history has shown time and again that the more you try to silence an idea, the harder it becomes to kill. For one thing, these cults thrive on secrecy and deception, the very traits that make them so difficult to track down in the first place. They hide in the cracks of society, in the forgotten corners of hive cities, the haunted voids of abandoned space stations, and the echoing catacombs beneath ancient fortresses. They are the whispers in the dark, the nameless figures who slip through the shadows of imperial bureaucracy, their faces lost to history, their names erased from the records. For every cult that the Inquisition manages to root out and destroy, another two slip through the cracks, adapting, evolving, and learning from the mistakes of their fallen brethren. And then there's the problem of loyalty. The Imperium demands absolute faith and obedience, but humanity is a fractured, divided species, riddled with conflicting loyalties and hidden doubts. Even within the ranks of the Adeptus Astartes, those gene-forged warriors of pure, unquestioning faith, there are those who harbor doubts, who question the official histories, who cling to the forgotten memories of their Legion days. And if the Emperor's own sons could turn against him, if the greatest heroes of the Imperium could fall to darkness, then what hope is there of stamping out every last spark of dissent among the common masses? There's also the simple fact that these cults, by their very nature, are designed to endure. They are patient, cunning, and adaptive, built to survive even the most brutal purges. Some are little more than whispers passed down from father to son, fragments of forbidden knowledge encoded in family crests and ancient bloodlines. Others are bound together by ritual and tradition, their members sworn to secrecy by oaths more binding than any imperial decree. They thrive in the forgotten places, the abandoned manufactorums and derelict space hulks, where the light of the Emperor rarely shines. They are the vermin in the walls, the ghosts in the machine, the memories that refuse to die. And then, of course, there's the problem of the Inquisition itself. For all its fearsome power, it is not a unified force. It is a fractured, paranoid institution, torn by internal rivalries and ideological schisms. Radical inquisitors often find themselves at odds with their more puritanical brethren, and the shadow wars they fight among themselves can provide the perfect cover for those who wish to hide. After all, who watches the watchmen? Who guards the guardians? In a galaxy where loyalty is bought with blood and betrayal, the line between hunter and hunted is often a thin one. But perhaps the greatest threat to the Inquisition's crusade against these secret keepers is the simple fact that ideas cannot be truly killed. You can burn books, purge data archives, and silence heretics, but you cannot unmake a memory, cannot erase a thought once it has taken root in the mind. As long as there are those who question, those who wonder, those who look beyond the carefully constructed myths of the Imperium and see the cracks in the facade, the truth will survive. Fragmented, distorted, and half forgotten perhaps, but never truly gone. In the end, maybe that's the real power of these cults, not their strength in numbers or their cunning in hiding, but their ability to endure, to cling to the shadows even as the galaxy burns around them. Because for every inquisitor who swears to hunt them down, there will always be another soul, somewhere in the dark, who whispers the forbidden truths of the past, who remembers the old stories, and who keeps the flame of memory alive even in the face of utter annihilation. It's a strange thought, isn't it? The idea that the Emperor, the very being these secret cults seek to honor and understand, might be fully aware of their existence. After all, this is the master of mankind we're talking about, the most powerful psychic entity humanity has ever known, a being whose mind stretches across the void like a spider's web, touching the thoughts of countless billions as they whisper their prayers to his golden throne. If anyone could see through the shadows and glimpse the hidden corners of his own empire, it would be him. But here's the thing. The Emperor, for all his power, is also a prisoner. Trapped within the golden throne, his flesh a withered husk, his mind shattered by the psychic trauma of the Horus heresy, he is a shadow of his former self. His consciousness, if it can even be called that, is scattered, fragmented, his once godlike awareness reduced to little more than a flicker of divine wrath and psychic fury. It's a tragic image, really, a being of unimaginable power, reduced to little more than a burning corpse, bound to the same galaxy he once sought to conquer. And yet, despite this, there are those who believe that the Emperor's mind is still active, that his psychic presence still stretches out across the galaxy, touching the minds of his followers, guiding their actions in subtle, unseen ways. Perhaps he sees more than we give him credit for. Perhaps, even in his broken state, he can still sense the hidden cults that whisper his name in the dark, still feel the pulse of their rituals and the echo of their prayers. After all, he is a being of immense power, a god in all but name, and gods have a way of knowing things that mortals can only dream of. But then again, maybe that's exactly what he wants. Maybe the Emperor, in his infinite wisdom, understands that the truth cannot be fully suppressed, that the more tightly you try to control the flow of information, the more likely it is to slip through your grasp. Maybe he allows these cults to exist, not out of ignorance, but out of necessity, a way of preserving the truth in a world built on lies, a means of ensuring that his true legacy will not be completely forgotten. It's a risky strategy, to be sure, but then again, the Emperor has always been a gambler. He bet the future of humanity on his Primarchs, his legions, and his Great Crusade, and when that gamble failed, he doubled down on the Imperium, building an empire of steel and faith on the shattered remnants of his fallen sons. Who's to say he hasn't placed a similar bet on the Memory Keepers, a hidden ace in the deck, a last, desperate gambit to preserve the truth in a galaxy gone mad? Of course, this is all just speculation, the kind of wild, whispered theory that gets you executed for heresy if you speak it too loudly in the wrong company. But there's a certain logic to it, a kind of grim, fatalistic sense that maybe, just maybe, the Emperor is not as blind as he seems, that his gaze still stretches out across the stars, seeing all, knowing all, even in his broken, ruined state. And if that's true, if the Emperor really does know about these cults, then perhaps they serve a purpose far greater than even their own members realize. Perhaps they are the hidden record keepers of humanity's darkest secrets, the last flickering sparks of true memory in a galaxy drowning in propaganda and lies. And perhaps, when the day finally comes for the Emperor to rise from his throne, to cast off his mortal shell and ascend to true godhood, it will be these shadowed figures who light the way, who guide humanity back to the truth, and who remind the galaxy of the man he once was, and the dream he once dared to dream. In the end, the Memory Keepers remain one of the most compelling mysteries in the grim darkness of the far future. They are the forgotten whispers in the dark, the hidden strings that tug at the fabric of imperial history, the echoes of a past that refuses to die. Whether they are scattered cells of rogue scholars, shadowy cults hidden in the depths of hive cities, or even fragments of the Emperor's own shattered mind, their very existence challenges the carefully constructed myth of the Imperium. The idea that the past is fixed, that the truth is known, and that the Emperor's will is unquestionable. And maybe that's the real power of these cults. Not just their ability to endure in the face of overwhelming odds, but their ability to make us question the very nature of truth itself. Because if there is one thing that the history of the galaxy has taught us, it's that even the mightiest empires are built on a foundation of lies, and that the truth, once uncovered, can be a weapon more powerful than any bolter or power sword. Of course, this is dangerous thinking, the kind of talk that gets you branded a heretic, that earns you a one-way trip to a penal world or a slow, screaming death in the hands of the Inquisition. But maybe that's the point. Maybe the Memory Keepers exist not just to preserve the past, but to remind us that the future is never set in stone, that even in the darkest corners of the galaxy, there are those who dare to ask the forbidden questions, who refuse to accept the easy answers, and who cling to the fragile hope that the truth, no matter how painful, is always worth seeking. It's a strange thought, isn't it? That the truth about the Emperor, the real unvarnished story of his rise and fall, might not just be hidden in dusty tomes and forgotten data vaults, but in the very songs and poems that echo through the dark corners of the galaxy. After all, music and poetry have always been powerful tools for preserving memory, for capturing the essence of a time long past, even when the written word has been erased or twisted by those in power. In some ways, a song can be more enduring than a data slate, more resilient than a stone tablet, because it lives in the hearts and minds of those who remember, passed down through the generations like a whispered secret. Consider the old Terran ballads, the war chants and mourning songs that echoed across the bloody battlefields of old Earth. Many of these songs, if they still exist at all, have likely been forgotten or twisted beyond recognition by the long centuries of imperial censorship, but perhaps some fragments remain, hidden in the guttering chants of penal legions, in the defiant battle cries of rogue voidfarers, in the soft, sorrowful lullabies of those who still remember the dark days before the coming of the Imperium. And it's not just the human voice that can carry these echoes of the past. The Mechanicum, for all its cold, machine-like logic, has its own forms of ritual and song, the crackling electronic hymns that echo through the halls of the forges, the clanging rhythmic chants of data priests as they commune with their machine gods. These strange mechanical anthems, though often dismissed as little more than background noise by those who do not understand their significance, might in fact contain fragments of forgotten history. Encrypted pulses of code buried in the depths of binary canticles, waiting for the right mind to decode them. And then, of course, there are the void songs, those haunting, wordless melodies that echo through the cold, empty corridors of abandoned starships, the strange, keening tones that drift through the static-laden chatter of ancient Vox signals. Some voidfarers claim to have heard these ghostly echoes in the depths of space, whispers of long-dead crewmen, forgotten battle hymns that linger in the ether long after their singers have turned to dust. Perhaps these, too, are fragments of the past, the dying songs of forgotten soldiers, the last fading notes of a lost era. And let's not forget the power of symbolism. Even the most innocent-seeming songs and poems can carry hidden meanings, subtle metaphors that only those who know where to look can fully understand. A line in an old marching song might be a coded reference to a long-forgotten battle. A whispered verse might carry the echoes of a secret alliance. A simple, repeated melody might encode a forgotten truth about the Emperor himself. After all, what better way to preserve a dangerous secret than to hide it in plain sight, to weave it into the very fabric of a culture where even the most watchful eyes of the Inquisition would never think to look? Of course, this is all just speculation, the kind of wild, whispered theory that gets you burned as a heretic if you speak it too loudly in the wrong company. But perhaps that's the real genius of these hidden songs, these forgotten fragments of memory. They are the shadows between the notes, the echoes that linger long after the music has faded, the last flickering sparks of a forgotten truth in a galaxy that demands silence and conformity. And perhaps, in the end, that's why the Memory Keepers have endured. Not because they are stronger or more cunning than their enemies, but because their songs, their poems, their whispered verses have become part of the very fabric of human history, a hidden code, a forgotten melody, a quiet rebellion against the darkness of ignorance and the crushing weight of imperial dogma. Because as long as there are those who remember, who carry the old songs in their hearts and whisper the forgotten verses to the stars, the past can never truly be silenced. So if you've made it this far, if you've listened to these whispered tales and dared to look beyond the surface of the Imperium's carefully constructed myth, then perhaps you too are a memory keeper, a seeker of lost truths, a wanderer in the shadows of history, a rebel against the darkness of ignorance. And if that's the case, then I have one final question for you. Are you ready to keep going? To keep searching for the hidden truths, the forgotten histories, and the forbidden knowledge that the Imperium would rather see buried in the ashes of 1,000 worlds? If so, then make sure you subscribe, because the galaxy is vast, the past is deep, and the truth is out there, waiting to be found.